Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Thank you once again for tuning back into Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, the podcast that talks about books and writing and stuff like that. And today we're talking mainly books, and I have a frog in my throat, but that's okay. If his car breaks down, he has to get towed. That's the joke of the day. Avanti Centrae is with us. Avanti Centrae, a new series is out. It's the Van Ops thriller series. But before we get to that, Avanti Centrae, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you, Dennis. I'm thrilled to be here to chat with you, and big shout out and a hello to all your fans.
Thank you very much. Let's talk a little bit about your early life. Where did you grow up and get your schooling, that kind of stuff?
Sure. I was a Midwest girl, born and bred in Indiana and Ohio, and lived here through high school, and went to college at Purdue University. And then I got a job in the computer field and moved to Los Angeles and enjoyed checking out the Hollywood sign and walking along Hollywood Boulevard, and had a good time there. And then I moved up to Northern California, where I've lived ever since.
And we're talking with Avanti Centrae. So why are they called the Boilermakers?
You know, I think it harkens back to the railroad times. There were a lot of engineers who built the railroads and built the engines, and there were Boilermakers. I think I think that's how some of the early steam engines were going. So if you ever look at the Purdue logo, I kind of want to say, it's been a while since I've been in college, but I want to say that there's an image of one of those cow catchers, so like an engineer with a cow catcher, and I believe that's where the logo and the theme comes from.
Well, I've always wondered about that. Excuse me, just wondered. So in your early days, I'm sure you read a lot, but did you ever do writing when you were like in grade school or high school, stuff like that?
Well, this is funny, Dennis. I did learn to read when I was quite young, and I want to say it was the kindergarten where I wrote my first story, and it was about a bull who saw red. And my mom kept it, of course, and gave it to me recently, and I got just a huge laugh out of it. So, yeah, I wanted to be an author from the time I was quite small, and, kind of held that dream for a long time.
Now, when I was a kid, I read Hardy Boys books and Agatha Christie, actually, and I could never get into science fiction like a lot of my friends. What did you read when you were in your formative years, shall we say?
I read just about everything from the back of milk bottles to the encyclopedia. In terms of fiction, though, one of the standout books that I remember was C.S. Lewis and the Narnia Chronicles. I just loved that, going through the wardrobe and into a whole new world and all the adventures that they enjoyed in that world of Narnia. That was eye-opening for me.
And what we have in front of us is, excuse me, I had to do that, The Lost Power, Avanti Centrae book, and that was from Black Opal Press, and then Solstice Shadows, also a Van Ops thriller. That one is out of Thunder Creek Press. So is there an inspiration for these books? It seems to me that it's the making of a big series. Did you have that in mind when you started out with it?
I did. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to combine a few elements in sort of the vein of a James Rollins or Steve Berry type thriller. So these are international thrillers, and they combine intrigue and a little history and a little science and a lot of mystery, kind of all wrapped up into an action package. And the first book, The Lost Power, is almost a prequel. So the series starts when There's a young woman named Maddie Marshall, and she is called to her father's vineyard in Napa, California, and she's taking with her a young boy from her dojo. She's an Aikido instructor and a computer geek, and the two of them are heading off to her father's vineyard because it's AJ's birthday, and her dad didn't say why, he wanted them to come visit. So she thought, I'll just take AJ along, and then we'll go over to the amusement park because kids love roller coasters. And so so the story begins with, Maddie being just sort of this everyday gal, and she gets there, and her estranged twin brother, Will, is there. And suddenly shots ring out on this foggy Napa morning, and her father's killed. And next thing you know, the snipers are shooting at them, and they end up having to flee and try to figure out why their father was killed. And they end up going on this quest that harkens back well over 1,000 years old. It turns out that they're descendants of the first king of Spain. And the first king of Spain got his paws on Alexander the Great's mysterious Egyptian weapon and found it to be so powerful that he hid it. And, of course, the people that are trying to kill Maddie and her brother Will are trying to find this mysterious Egyptian weapon of Alexander the Great's, and our twins have to find this before the bad guys do. And so I really love the idea of, we have a lot of action movies and books in our culture, but very few of them start with people that are just everyday people, right? They often start with, hey, I'm a, retired CIA agent, or, I'm already an FBI agent, or,
oh, right.
I'm a cop, or, so very few of them start with the heroes being everyday people like most of us.
And you have Maddie, and her brother is sort of a geeky guy, and they don't quite get along too well, from what I've gathered from the first few chapters of The Lost Power by Avanti Centrae that I've read. So obviously they must tighten their bonds later on, or are we giving away some secrets here?
Well, I think that's part of the fun of reading, is to find out if they end up, becoming friends again or not. There were some things that happened in high school that neither of them really cared for, and they haven't spoken much in the decade or so since high school. And so they're both carrying a little bit of a grudge and are forced into the situation where they have to work together or die.
Or die.
And or die. And that kind of situation can bring out the worst in people. So it's inherently good drama, which makes good conflict, which makes a good story.
And it's The Lost Power is book 1, and that I have in front of me, and Solstice Shadows book 2. And what's coming up next? I think there's another one in the works. Am I wrong?
No, Dennis, you are correct. I am currently working on book 3, which is carries on with the twins, Maddie and Will, and a covert agent named Bear Thorensen. And so the three of them return in the third book, currently titled The Medallion of Nostradamus, but that title could change. And they're trying to find out how Nostradamus was able to predict the future. And, there's enemies of the state who want to know the same thing. So that one's fun. I'm on chapter 26 right now. Trying to write about a chapter a day.
And your chapters, I've noticed, are short, which I like, because when you're lying in bed or something at night, you say, well, I'll just read one more chapter, and then 3 pages later it's, I'll just read one more chapter, and then before you know it, it's 4 a.m. and you've almost finished the book. But is that intentional on your part, or is that just the way the story unfolded?
That's just the way the story unfolds for me. I like to set a chapter in a place, and I like to have each chapter sort of tell a little mini story, if you will. And there's, that's just some of them end up being, 5 or 6 pages, and a few of them end up only being 2. But I've found that that's just kind of my writing style, is 3 or 4 pages is about what it takes to move the story forward in that particular chapter.
And we're talking with Avanti, Centrae. The Lost Power is out there. Solstice Shadows. And we have Maddie Marshall is sort of the lead character. Now, it's unusual, at least in my short life of reading books, short experience, that there's a female heroine or female lead in action books and movies. Did you kind of plan it that way, or again, is that just the way it developed?
I did plan it that way. I saw that a number of my peers have written stories where there are both male and female protagonists. James Rollins, for instance, does a really nice job with this. However, what I found was that almost all of them have more of the male perspective than the female perspective. And, we live in a time where men for thousands of years have been, shall we say, sort of the dominant force. And it seems like we're moving into a place right now where there's becoming a lot more equality between the sexes. And I wanted to show a strong woman who was also vulnerable, a real person. And I wanted to sort of show that equality, because I've also seen quite a few stories. They may not always be action stories, but like in the mystery genre, you always have a lot of the female perspective. And sometimes, like with Daniel Silva, you get the male perspective in an international mystery. But I thought it would be fun to have both Maddie and Will's perspective. So they end up kind of getting equal screen time, and sometimes we hear from Bear's perspective, and in Solstice Shadows we have an archaeoastronomer who's a woman, and we get some of her perspective. So it's a little more equal playtime there for the various heroes.
One of our earlier interviews here on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff was with Canadian songwriter Kim Mitchell, and he sort of related the writing process for him as being the road manager. The song just appears and he just shepherds it into where it's supposed to go. Do you find that the story is there and you just put it on paper?
Sometimes. And sometimes I have to fight it kicking and screaming to show up.
Right.
So sometimes I raffle it. The beginning of this book that I'm working on now, the third book in the series, I kind of had an idea of where it might go based on where the first 2 books had been and some of the unexplored dynamic around their mother. But it took me, about a month or 2 of wrangling some different ideas before I really hit a part of a thread that I wanted to follow and where it started to really come together. And I'm a big outliner. And so once I get on something that feels right, I just start adding and start adding and start adding. And then when I've got a pretty full outline, then that's when I tackle a chapter or 2 a day. And sometimes it just kind of flows, and other times I sit there and I stare at the page and I go back and forth to my outline, or I have to do some more research, to be inspired. Last night I was researching this cool medieval box that shows up in this third book. Once I get in a groove, then it flows pretty well. The second book, Solstice Shadows, that one seemed to just kind of, fall out of space and onto the page. So it depends a little bit on the story, but there was quite a bit of follow-on from book 1 in the second book in Solstice Shadows. So it just flew.
It just flew. Avanti Centrae is our guest today. We're talking about The Lost Power and Solstice Shadows and a third one in the works. You can brag on yourself a little bit here. The Lost Power, sticker on it, a grand prize winner and international award-winning thriller author. So that must feel pretty good for your first book to have some prize ribbons you can attach to the cover.
Oh my gosh, yes. When it won the genre grand prize, it was still a manuscript. I didn't even have a publisher. My agent was shopping it at the time, so it was a game changer because it opens doors. I think that's why I was able to get some really nice blurbs for the story. Both James Rollins and Steve Berry said nice things, as did Ann Charles and a number of other authors. And then it went on to get an honorable mention at the Hollywood Book Festival. And it also took home a bronze at the Wishing Shelf Award. And then Solstice Shadows, I entered that in a few contests, and it took a bronze at the Reader's Favorite Awards, which is a huge contest. Jim Carrey has won medals for writing in that contest, and it's entered by people all over the world. As is the Chanticleer contest, is also huge, and Solstice Shadows took home basically the best thriller last year. So that's been wonderful. And there's another book that I finished last year during the pandemic that we haven't talked about because it's not part of the series, but it's about Cleopatra. It's called Cleopatra's Vendetta, and it's currently a finalist for the upcoming Chanticleer Awards that are going to be announced in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I've been very, very blessed, and I'm hugely grateful for everyone who's read it and given it a positive review or helped it win an award. Very grateful.
Avanti Centrae is with us. What's your writing technique or your routine? Do you do it every day for X amount of hours, or how does that work for you?
So it depends on what stage of the game I'm in. If I'm releasing a book, there's a lot of time spent with marketing and PR. If I'm at the beginning of a book where I'm just forming it, I can go days without actually writing something, but I'm thinking of ideas, or I'm researching, or I'm jotting down an idea and then sitting on it. Once I actually have the outline in place, then I become more structured, and I try to write a chapter or two a day, and that can take me, a number of hours, depending on how much research needs to happen for that chapter, and then there's always, the various marketing and PR type things that happen in the background.
And did you have like a lesson or something that was just the hardest thing you had to come to terms with, being a writer, published author, something that you just said, what the heck is all this about? Why do I have to do this?
I did. So I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that I got a degree in computers. And as you can imagine, working in IT for over 20 years, I wrote a lot of email and a lot of technical documents and, felt fairly proficient with the English language. But when I went to write novels, it was all about showing and not telling, which is just the opposite of writing technical business types of communication. And so I had to really, and I still do actually have to consciously practice things like, let's say I'm in the middle of a chase scene. I have to consciously talk about the visual cues that our hero or heroine is going through, right? So their heart might be beating, or they might be sweating, or they might be breathing really fast. It's a little bit more natural for me just to say, oh, Maddie was panicked. Well, that doesn't give, the reader the same experience as if, Maddie's palms are sweaty and her heart's racing and her breathing's shallow, So that's been one of the hardest things for me to learn, and I still practice it quite a bit.
And you were a whitewater river, it's hard for me to say, whitewater river raft guide. Which rivers did you whitewater guide on in your previous life?
Say it 5 times really fast. Yeah, I did a bunch of different fun things in my 20s. I traveled all over the world, and for a couple of summers, I was a whitewater river raft guide on the South Fork of the American River primarily, which is outside of Sacramento, roughly between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. And I broke a finger on that river.
Ouch.
Yep, got thrown out of the boat and kind of whacked my finger on something and still kind of have the scars to prove on that. But I have a lot of really fun memories too. One night we went down the river at nighttime, just a bunch of river guides, and one of the other boats got in trouble. And so one of the fellows that I was rafting with, he and I were responsible for watching for the boat to come downstream, and we had to go chase it, and we were right above this rapid called Satan's Cesspool, and we had to somehow get this boat that was full of water off to the side without all of us going down Satan's Cesspool. And the guy that I was with ended up falling into the water, so I had to pull him back in, and we had to grab onto these branches on the side of the water and barely got the boat over to the side in time. And I'll tell you, that was the most adrenaline-inducing experience of my life. I was awake, I think, until midnight the next day. I had so much adrenaline going on from that.
It sounds like a scene from a Meryl Streep movie on the river up in Montana, the River Wild. So there you go.
Yep.
Wow. And you also,
there you go.
And you have a German Shepherd that you play with when you're not writing?
I do, yes. Her name is Gracie, and she's ball obsessed. It's a problem, but we're trying to do a 12-step program about it. But so far, the higher power has not helped her minimize the ball addiction. She's just all about that ball, whether it's inside the house, outside the house, wherever we go, she needs the ball in her mouth.
Well, we have a dog and 2 cats here, and our dog is a flat-coated retriever, and she retrieves the stuff but doesn't give it back. So, no, the idea is you get the duck and you bring it to the hunter and drop it. You don't just run around in circles with it after you've retrieved it, but 7 years later, she still hasn't figured that out. But anyway, Avanti, Centrae, The Lost Power, Solstice Shadows, Cleopatra's Medallion?
Vendetta.
Cleopatra's Vendetta. Oh, no. Do you have a website or something like that we can locate these things on?
Absolutely. It's my first and last name .com, or because my name is a little bit unusual, the simplest thing is just to go to vanops.net, VANOPS.net. And people can actually get the first 6 chapters for free. Vanops.net.
Oh, that's perfect. That's VANOPS.net. And that has something to do with the books themselves, the Van Ops. We won't give it away, but that's involved in the books, right?
Right.
So
right.
You must be visiting friends and family back there in Indiana, so we'll let you get back to it. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been a treat.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Dennis. Thank you again. Much appreciated, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.